What's up, guys? Swift here. I'm honored today to be joined by a special guest, a guy I consider a friend, 30 years in the NFL. I think it's director of pro scouting or director of the scouting department. I had it, but I don't want, off the top of my head, I don't want to mistake it on you, Greg, but it's an honor. Greg Gabriel, welcome to the show, my guy.
It was director of college scouting, but in reality, we did a lot more than that because we had, if you look at the setup that the Bears have now, polls, then he's got an assistant general manager, and he's got a director of player personnel, and he's got a director of college scouting. So there's all these different layers. We had Jerry Angelo, the general manager, I ran college scouting, Bobby DePaul ran pro scouting. And so, there was nobody in between. So our job really was more of a director of player personnel type job. We just got director of scouting type money.
The way to say it.
Different titles within the league, different titles have different pay scales. And the general manager has those. So if you want to give a guy a raise, give him a new title. Hey, that'll automatically push him up.
That makes a ton of sense. And to be honest, one of the reasons why I'm so honored to have you on, you were part of some of the best Bears draft classes of my life. And some of the ones that got me so interested in the NFL draft, because I had watched the draft before that. I'd always been a draft fan since I was a kid because it was fun to me, even though it wasn't as covered back then. Back then, all we had was Mel Kiper Jr. and, one or two other guys. But when you had those drafts, I remember in particular, my favorite one, even though the first round didn't work out as well as it should have, was the 2003 draft. Having 2 first-round picks and then bringing in a guy like Charles Tillman and then Lance Briggs later in the draft. I even liked some of the guys later. I believe it was Justin Gage and Bobby Wade off the top of my head, some receivers that I like those guys too. Gage he was the big X-type receiver, and Bobby Wade was the punt returner type little slot guy. But yeah, those really got me involved in the draft. And of course, probably my favorite player we ever got was Tommy Harris in that draft as well. But I love it. So
Tommy was the 04 draft.
That was right. Yeah.
Yeah, the year before that draft you're talking about, we had 2 firsts, and Michael Haynes was the first.
The Penn State defensive end.
He was a bust. And actually, we had a scout that kind of when his contract was up, we let him go elsewhere because he didn't give us the right background information. Michael Haynes was in college was a pretty good player, and he was defensive MVP of the Senior Bowl. So you look at it and you say, we're getting a hell of a player. That was now a different scheme that we played with under Lovey. This was Greg Blosch's scheme. But for that scheme, he was a good fit. But there was one important missing ingredient. And his agent's a good friend of mine, and we still talk about it. He didn't love football. Oh. And that's the key to success in the National Football League. And that's where you put the blame on the scout because that's his job.
And that was that draft right there probably really got me like so into the draft and scouting, guys. So I do have to ask you one question about that one. If you guys didn't trade out and trade down from that first pick and you stayed, I don't believe it was pick 3 or pick 4. And
we had 4 and we traded actually the day before with the Jets.
Yep. If you guys would have stayed and not got that offer from the Jets, do you, in your opinion, because obviously things didn't go that way, so you never know. But in your opinion, who do you think we would have taken in the top?
I don't remember. In all honesty, I don't remember what our board looked like. But they took Sheldon Richardson.
Okay,
the defensive who everybody liked, and he was a bust. But Terry Bradway, who was a really good friend of mine. Terry and I worked together in New York for the Giants, and then Terry went to Kansas City, and then to the Jets as GM, and. Terry called us the day before, and he wanted that pick bad. He wouldn't tell us why, but we said, okay, you give us your 2 first, we'll do it. And we went into that draft, hoping to trade down because now people might not want to like this or might not like this answer, but we wanted Rex.
Okay.
Down the road. And that Rex was the 4th quarterback taken. So Carson Palmer was number 1. Then there was Byron Leftwich.
And then I think
Leftwich went about 7 or 8 or something.
Yeah.
Then there was, and I can't think of his name
Kyle
now. The kid,
Bowler, Kyle Bowler, the dude
Kyle,
from
Kyle Bowler. Well, and Rex was the fourth guy. Bowler. Now, Baltimore thought we were taking Bowler,
okay.
and so they jumped in front of us to take him. So Phil Savage was the director of player personnel, and so I mean, just to bust his balls, I sent Phil a quick note. I said, hey, we weren't taking him. You didn't need to make that trade. But what we did, because I always say it's the lying season, and you try to create different things. We brought in a bunch of quarterbacks, none of which were Rex. We brought in Phil Simms, Bowler. We put him in front of Chris Simms. Put him in front of the media. Let them have a little press conference on their visit and all this. So, and Bowler had a great pro day. Got on one knee and threw the ball 75 yards in the air with a tight spiral. Big deal. But here's what happened. We actually eliminated him at the combine.
Ooh.
But for everybody else, we loved him. I mean, that's and the reason we eliminated him was at the combine interview, which was at that time 15 minutes long. It's 20 now. He comes in, and he did not have success until his final year at Cal. And they had brought in a new head coach, Jeff Tedford, who's a very good quarterback coach and offensive coordinator type coach. So his completion percentage jumped from like 48 to 59% in 1 year. And he's got this big cannon arm. But before that, no success. So we asked him, said, hey, you went through some tough times. How did you handle that? And he said, and this is the answer that got him crossed off the board. He said, well, I used to wear a hoodie all the time, and I'd walk around campus with the hoodie up so nobody recognized me. Wrong answer. And, you're a quarterback, man. You better be brash and bold and cocky and everything else. That answer alone eliminated him. And he turned out he was a bust. He was a guy who had a big, strong arm, but he couldn't play football.
Gotcha.
And Rex, I mean, we got Rex at 22.
Yep.
People would say, well, if Rex had not torn up his ankle, and when I say tore up his ankle, I mean, he had like 12 breaks in there or something.
Yeah.
I mean, he shattered his ankle. He had a bunch of screws in there. I'm not 12 breaks, 12 screws, but a bunch of different breaks. I mean, it was a mess. And in fact, we joked, and you're young, so you might not remember this, but there was a racehorse back near then called Barbaro.
Oh, I've heard of Barbaro, yep.
Okay, and Barbaro was on the back stretch of a race, and he fell, shattered his leg, down by the ankle. Most horses get put down. They did not put him down. And then I remember seeing an x-ray. They operated on him, and he had like 15 screws, and you could see all the screws going through his ankle in there. And we used to joke and say, that's what Grossman's ankle looks like. So, but anyway, Rex's game, because he was short and he was short-armed, was lateral movement in the pocket. And when he shattered his ankle, all movement skills went south. So now he became a short quarterback who couldn't move, and his game was dead. So, I mean, before that, he was a winning quarterback. He got us to a Super Bowl. People want to say, oh, you took Rex Grossman. I don't care. There's only two quarterbacks that have got the Bears to Super Bowls, and that's Jim McMahon and Rex Grossman. So if you don't like it, that's your problem.
I got a Rex jersey his rookie season, so I know he didn't play until late in the season that year. And I still remember where I was when he tore his ankle up. That was the Minnesota game. It was early in the season, I believe, and it was on a scramble to the right end zone. And I remember he tore his ankle up. They took him out of the game. That was the year. Is that the year he came back at the end of the season, or?
I don't remember. He tore his ankle up. I believe it was in St. Louis in the preseason.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that one too. Yep. Okay, that was. Yep. He's got hurt a couple times, man. And
but that's when he really messed it up good. And but another funny story, when we drafted him, his agent was the late Eugene Parker. He was a great agent, and he had Devin, among some of the players we had, and Eugene was a very hard negotiator. It said Benson too, so he had a bunch of players that we took. Really good guy, and one of my closest friends. He died a few years ago. Anyway, Mr. Grossman has a party going on in downtown Chicago the day of the draft.
Ooh.
And so Jerry calls, and Jerry was real close with the agent too, with Eugene. And so Jerry calls Eugene and asks him what the Rex doing. And usually Eugene's like, Jerry, don't f with me, man. He goes, the father's having a fit. The kid hasn't been taken yet. He doesn't know, I don't know what to do. I'm just sitting here. He goes, big dog, we're going to take him next pick. Does Jerry stop with me? He goes, I'm serious. We're taking him next pick. And so,
nice.
And that was the whole story behind it. But he didn't think we were going to be in the market for a quarterback, and we were.
Oh yeah, man, that's incredible. I remember that draft. It was a great one. I actually was a huge Cedric Benson fan 2 years later. We're talking about a guy who never worked out, who I still thought. I actually came, so after we drafted him and he held out the rookie year, all that. I have a ton of Cedric Benson stories, but he went to Cincinnati later on, right? And I went, my dad lives in Cincinnati. I came to a Bengals game in Cincinnati, and it was Cedric. It ended up being Cedric Benson's career game. You probably remember there was a game where he ran for it was somewhere like 150 and 3 touchdowns on us in Cincinnati. And I had front row seats just watching it. And I was like, oh man, of course Cedric does this to us. But
Ced, actually, when you look at his career, it wasn't too bad. He ran for just under 7,000 yards. Ced's problem was Ced.
His Texas tape, I mean, you can still go back. The dude was incredible at Texas.
Oh, God, he was good. But
I thought he was going to be our next
he was a loving, in all honesty, Swifty, I still don't know why we took him. I mean, it's like I wasn't totally on board, but
that was the first time I ever watched a draft where we got the guy I wanted. I thought, no, I wanted Braylon Edwards, but I knew he wouldn't fall to us. So I ended up falling in love with Cedric, watching his Texas tape. He had those.
Braylon didn't go in the top 3.
Braylon was second. I thought Braylon was second.
You might be right on that, but it was
like Braylon and then Ronnie Brown.
3 running backs went in the top 5 that draft.
Cadillac went before, or Ronnie Brown went before us, and Cadillac
then Ced, and then Cadillac.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a guy. It might have been the Texas connection too. Lovey really wanted Ced, which didn't make sense because we had Jones, and Jones was still a young guy, very productive, and that's what. 2 problems. One was the locker room was huge in that Ced Jones was a pros pro, or
Cedric Benson or Thomas Jones.
Thomas Jones was a pros pro. Worked his ass off.
Had the biggest arms I've ever seen in training.
Let me tell you something.
He would come out in training camp and flex, and we
after practice in preseason out of camp down in Bourbonnais, he'd be in the tent after a practice doing curls.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on those guns. Now
he would come. Now the little in Bourbonnais, because we went to training camp 20 straight years in Bourbonnais, and the little exit where they left the field and then went back to the locker room. It was fenced off on both sides. He'd come into that tunnel, and there'd be fans or not the tunnel, but just walk through where it's fenced off there, and the fans are on each side, and they're chanting. And he rolled up his sleeves, and he'd be flexing like he was Popeye to each side. And whichever side was louder, that's where he'd go sign autographs. But he did that so much, man. And my friends would just be joking about how big his arms were. They're like, he could squeeze us in a headlock and pop our head off.
But to finish the story, really good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And all the veterans loved him. So now Ced holds out. And back then we didn't have the rookie pool, the rookie pay scale like they have now. It's really stupid to even think about holding out now. So he's holding out for big money, and Eugene was a tough negotiator. He gets a figure in his head, and he's not coming off that figure. So, and he'll let the guy sit. He must have gave her something that he signed, and he didn't play until the final preseason game because it was like the day before that he signed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of camp, when he's in camp, I mean, the vets just gave him a hard time. On the field, they knocked the shit out of him. And then
I remember I was at one of the practices where I heard Mike Brown like verbally assaulting him most of the practice. And I loved Mike Brown, but he was basically calling him dumb rookie pretty much the whole time. And, I know he had him carry his pads off at the end and all that, but he was pretty much, Mike Brown wasn't, I don't even think he practiced that day. He was kind of out and he had his jersey rolled up and he was just behind the secondary. Like he was a secondary coach behind the two safeties yelling stuff at Cedric Benson. And I'm like, oh man, this isn't going to be fun.
Well, I had Jason McKee on my show once, and we were talking about it because Jason was close with Jones, and he's in the locker room. Jason's locker, there was like Jason, Jones.
Oh,
and he said, I'm the man in the middle. And I had to keep, and he goes, I had to listen to it from both sides. And I'm not going to say Jones and Said didn't get along because that's not the case. But the veterans were like, we don't need this guy. We got this guy. And it was just a bad situation. Learned a lot. And that's one of the reasons why, when we're going through the thing with Justin Fields, before Justin got traded, and veterans were saying, that's our guy, man. And I could see the whole thing just happening again. If they're not going to buy into Caleb, it's going to be problems with the vets.
That's one reason why I think there was no chance we could have kept Justin Fields and drafted
no way.
Caleb
No way.
Williams. Yeah, it would have split the locker room. And
there's no question about that. You had to choose one or the other. And Ryan did the right thing. He did what he thought was best for the club today with him as the guy in charge of doing that. So, he's trying to make the team to his image and likeness, and that's fine. We can like it, dislike it, whatever. But he's the guy in the end who's going to be held accountable.
100%. And I could talk old draft stories with you forever, Greg. I mean, honestly, it's awesome. But let's go ahead. Let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about Caleb Williams, who was the Bears' #1 overall pick this year. I think everyone is pretty much sold on him at this point. There were questions in the pre-draft process about his character. And I do remember at some point you did question. I'm not saying you questioned his character, but you did say not his character, his football character.
It's the intangibles.
He's grown on me in the last month, seeing all his interviews, seeing all this. Has your opinion changed at all since he's done so many interviews and been out here and we've gotten to know him better? Has that changed at all to you?
Well, I'm going to say not 100%. I mean, you like everything you see, you like everything you hear.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing the right things. He's been well coached, and he takes coaching. Okay, so that part's obvious.
For sure.
He's still got to step in the locker room, go to practice, win the team over in practice, work hard in practice, and let that carry over to games. He's got what the question is with me, and I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything. It's he didn't handle adversity well at USC. Now he can say I handled adversity. Well, no, he didn't, and they didn't play as well. Granted. Now, he put a lot on his shoulder. When you look, you could look at it and say, hey, the USC team stunk. He knew he had to get at least 40 points on the board, maybe 50 to win a game. And so he left a lot of throws on the field to go hit home runs and didn't hit those home runs. You can look at it that way, or you can look at the frustration because they lost some close games. But it just wasn't the same player as we saw in 2022 that totally dominated college football.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you see that, the crying, it's like, well, did he handle adversity? And he's going to face it here now because they're going to lose some games. And it's how is he going to, when he plays poorly, is he going to accept responsibility and say, hey, that's on me, and grow from it. And I just want to see that. And as long as he does that, Then he's maturing. Because to me, it's he's an only child. He's been great at everything he's ever done. Okay, so now he's in the big man's world, and granted, you got to start looking at players in college, coming out of college, a little differently, because there's going to be more and more like Caleb. They're in the NIL world. There are already rich men coming out. Not all of them, but there's going to be some every year that are rich men coming out of college. You can see it the way the transfer portal is. I work for some agents and I got to write reports. And some of these guys that, they send me names to write, and you write up and you look at their school history. They're going, this year is going to be the third school they've been at in 3 years. And
Great.
So it's like right away you say, are they chasing NIL money?
It's
so
it's a different
how
era.
important is football to them, or is it money?
And that's something that's gonna be just another. Well, it's always been something the scouts have had to look for, but it's something that you really couldn't see before. Do you think having the access to the NIL money is going to make it easier to determine something like that from these kids, or do you think it'll just make it harder?
Well, I think it'd be easier because you're going to see how they react to money.
I like that. And
does money change them, or are they being smart with it? Are they being ostentatious and go out and get a $75,000-$80,000 car, or more, $100,000 car, dressed to the hilt, and all that money when they don't know what their pro career is going to be, and then come away with it with nothing, or just be frugal with it, be smart.
Perfect. And I think it'll come down to, when it comes to Caleb Williams, it'll come down to if he wins games. And Ryan Poles has put him in a enviable position here with 3 legit wide receivers that I don't remember the Bears quarterback having that situation in my lifetime. But if he can take the talent and turn it into wins, I don't think we should kill the expectations on him and overhype him. But he is in a beautiful position here. And I think it comes down to it. If he wins football games, he'll win over the locker room and he'll win over this fan base, because this is a city that just loves football.
Oh, yeah. Well, he'll win the locker room by the way he handles himself in practice, the way he handles himself in meetings. So far to date, it's been an A+ for him. But still, the tough part hasn't come yet. And actually, that's going to start. I said it on my show this morning. I like the way, you can, after the draft, you can use this weekend coming up or the next weekend for your rookie minicamp. And the Bears are going to have it the next week. And part of it is because of the date. Those kids are coming for the rookie camp and they ain't going home. They're here then for the offseason program. But the guys who go this way are here for the weekend, go home for a week, and then come back for the program. I think it's the Bears, by waiting that extra week, sets it up better, because the kids, all the kids that are signed, are here for the duration then. And that's going to help them. So, he'll come into camp next Thursday to Hallis Hall, and he's here now until the end of OTAs and around the 20th of June, whatever that is.
Around that time. So, question to that real quick. How much access do the coaches in particular have with the players during that time period?
Every day.
I know they limit a lot. They can. Okay.
There's on the field 5 days or 4 days. The offseason program is really 4 days.
Okay.
So they're on the field 4 days. They have a time limit, but you can't have offense against defense. So you have one end of the field offense, one end of the field defense. You're doing a lot of install, playing against air, doing plays and whatever. It's not until you get to the OTA portion that you can actually have offense versus defense. And there's still no contact. And the league looks at the tape, and they'll penalize you. They'll take days away the following year. Yeah, it happens. If guys, and it happens, it's because of the DBs. Especially if you're playing a lot of press, they get up in the guy's face and they want to, Roma Dunze would be a perfect example. Okay, we got a big 6'3", 215-pound receiver. I'm going to
JJ's not
jam
going to
his
want to
ass.
let him
I'm
just
going to
run
jam
all
his ass
over.
with the line of scrimmage. Well, you can't do that. You can't touch him. But that's what happens. Just stuff
Especially
like
with
that.
our
And the
DBs
league,
too. We got some attitude with our DBs. They don't want to see a rookie come in here and run all over the place on them.
right?
So that's gonna lead to a lot of excitement and a lot of fun battles this year at training camp. And I think the show out for this year at training camp is probably going to be crazy with Caleb Williams. And I think this year's camp is going to be wild. There's going to be some battles with our offense and defense, and we're going to see how Caleb Williams responds. We know the defense, especially guys like Jalen Johnson, they want a piece of him.
Oh yeah, no question. It's all about competition, and the DB group now has gotten some pretty good experience. Those guys were young, and now they've, in some cases, they're 2 or 3 years in the league, so now they feel comfortable with themselves, and you're going to have these brash young rookies coming in, and they're going to show them who's boss.
It's going to be a fun camp. But that leads me to the next guy who we drafted, and probably my favorite pick of the entire draft, just because of the value we got him for. He was my 3rd overall player in the whole draft. That's Rome Odunze, the wide receiver out of Washington. I haven't heard specifically your thoughts on Odunze. I don't know if you were a huge fan of taking a wide receiver that early, but I don't think any of us thought Odunze was going to fall to 9. I thought he was going to go to the Giants personally the whole time. I just thought the Giants would take him because their whole wide receiver core is underneath 6 foot tall. So he seemed like a perfect fit there. What are your thoughts on Odunze and what he brings to the Bears?
Well, number one, I love him. And I had all 3 of those top receivers very close.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I did not have Harrison number 1. I had Neighbors number 1. And I think it was a neck and neck race between Harrison and Odunze. Harrison, probably a little better route runner, but I think Odunze is better after the catch and gets better separation. Even, I know they got GPS times, and his GPS times are really fast, so you can, he didn't have to run a 40. But his, as good as Harrison is when you're watching tape, and I had mentioned this, we were going to do it on the show, and then we really didn't have time, is that when you put Neighbors, Harrison, or Odunze, watch tape back to back to back, you can see the separation, and you can see which one does what better than the other. And why I had Neighbors as the top guy is because of his run after catch ability and his ability to separate. He doesn't separate by a yard or 2. He separates by 5 yards.
He's got elite speed. Yeah, his burst is insane.
Yeah, and the way he can cut, his body control. And of the 3, the guy who's probably the worst, and we're nitpicking here, is Harrison. And Harrison's the worst on the run after of those 3. But he's got that huge catch radius. He's going to go up and get it. He can jump out of the building. So all of them are going to be really good players. It gets down to the fact that, I was talking to Chris Ballard about it, and Ballard had Harrison number 1. It gets down to flavor. What flavor do you want? Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, whatever.
It was a special wide receiver class, and that's why there's a lot of scouts out there who have Rome Odunze as the number 1. And my favorite thing about his game is you could see it anytime you watch the Washington tape. He was the guy that the quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., trusted the most when he just had to throw the ball up. And Odunze was so smart and his ability to adjust to the ball in the air, he would fight back through DBs. He would draw a ton of flags. Even if it was a poorly thrown pass, then Rome Odunze would be able to adjust to it. And even if he doesn't catch it, he's going to fight for it and possibly get a flag. So he's a guy you can just trust. He's another guy with high football IQ that I think pairing him with Caleb Williams long term, it's a dream come true for Bears fans. We got a QB1 and a guy who's going to be, in my opinion, a legit wide receiver number 1 in the NFL, but he has no pressure to do that because we have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen.
Right, but do you know what I think the best part of, you don't hear a lot of people talk about him. From what I understand, his character's up here. Not just his football character, his personal character. But the guy loves the game and he works hard. There's no question about that. But he's a good person.
He
And
grew up on a farm, so he's a hard
yeah,
worker. He's humble. And everything that I've seen on him so far is he's an awesome guy.
but that's going to be good for Caleb too.
Mm-hmm. Great point. That's another perfect point. So we'll transition off him. We'll go to we made a couple of other picks. In the third round, we drafted the offensive tackle from Yale, Karan Omega G. I liked him a lot. I think he compares a lot to Braxton Jones. Insane
Yep.
arm length and athleticism. Even though he didn't get to test because of the injury, he's a guy who I believe, and what I said, so a lot of people were like, why was he still there? If you think he's that good, why was he there in the third round? He missed most of last year. And he could have came back to school and rose his draft stock, but the stories I heard, he talked to scouts and they told him he was going to be a day 2 pick anyway. So he decided to come out and he didn't test. I think it's a coup that he fell to us. I think he's a guy, if he would have played all year last year at the same level he played those first couple of games before he hurt the quad, I think he's a guy who could have been drafted even earlier than the guy the Packers took in the first round, Jordan Morgan. What are your thoughts on that?
No, he's got a lot of talent, but he's very raw.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just in technique and stuff, the natural talent and the perfect comp is Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones, FCS level, and in reality, Yale's probably a better program. The competition they play isn't quite as good as what Braxton played against out there on the West Coast, but the program itself, Southern Utah's program. Okay, it's probably one of the worst programs I've ever seen, and I've been to almost every school in the country that has football, as far as FCS and Division One, and you know, so he came in. It was just natural talent, and he needed to get stronger in the lower body. He has, and he'll probably be. You know, there's a big jump from year 1 to year 2 as far as his ability to anchor. I think there'll be even a bigger jump going into year 3. The game's important to him. His teammates like him. Coaches love him. Bright side. But this guy is similar in that it's another FCS guy who needs development. Arms are actually a little longer. I think Braxton's are 35 and a half, and this guy's over 36. Tie the shoes without bending over.
I think I think he's more powerful. I mean, he has the more of an ability to anchor than Braxton Jones does, in my opinion. At least entering.
Yeah, he's got. Yes, I agree with that. He's bigger in the lower body, and he's got real good natural bend. He's not quite as athletic in space. He's athletic, not quite as athletic as Braxton. But here's what I've been saying now since this happened is one of those guys is going to end up being a guard. Not this year, next year. I think this year is going to be Amagadeji's not going to play unless he has to play because of injury. But inside, Tevin's, and I like Tevin.
Me too.
When he's on his game, he's the best run blocking guard there is in football, in my opinion. Okay, his pass blocking's hot and cold, but he hadn't been durable.
And guards,
there was a disconnect between him and the coaching staff. Whether that's still there, you know, who knows? But he's going into the final year of his contract. And is he a guy that, number one, polls didn't draft, and there was that disconnect that in year 1, and when you look at the durability issue, is he a guy that they're going to give, if you look at the money guards have gotten this year in the offseason, big money, you going to do that, or you're going to let him walk and move one of those guys inside? And then the other guy too, Nate Davis, I give him a pass for last year. You know, his mom died right before the season started. Everything that was going on during the offseason had to do with that. But the Bears never told you, and they didn't need to. It's personal. But he's still got to show up this year. He's got to, you know, have the eraser out and erase the inconsistent play from last year. I mean, when you go back and you look at Tennessee tape, he was a pretty good player.
He was.
So he's capable of doing it. But, you know, the hierarchy, the front office, they might have to make a decision between Tevin and the other guy,
Nate Davis. Yeah.
Nate Davis for
We can
next
get out of
year.
his contract next year. Yeah.
And so it just wouldn't shock me to see either Braxton or
Karan.
Kiran being inside next year. Who it's going to be, I don't know. If Braxton really comes on this year like I think he's going to, why would I move him?
That's kind of where I think it is. I think why I believe it was a perfect pick, because I still believe Braxton has the upside to be a potential top 10 type of tackle in the NFL. He's a
No
starting
question.
tackle right now. I'm glad you agree with me, because I've been when I mentioned that a year ago, I was laughed at by people I thought
No.
about. So I
I'm
love
a
it.
big fan of Braxton Jones. And it's because I'm going to say it right now, and they can laugh all they want. There's not a tackle in this draft who has the traits he has.
Exactly. And that's
The
what and
natural athletic traits that
he's
he
so
has.
talented. He just has to put it all together and
Right.
continue getting stronger in his ability to anchor. He's really smart. He's a really hard worker. And like most of these polls picks, he's a guy who seems like he genuinely loves the game of
Oh,
football
yeah, no
and
question.
wants to get better. So I love Braxton Jones. And that's why I think Karan is a guy who's perfect, because he needs that development. Like you said, he can come in right now and he needs to work with Chris Morgan, rework his pass technique and all that, get better. But so it's not going to put pressure on Braxton Jones yet. It doesn't stop Braxton from developing. But if Braxton does stumble or get hurt this year, we have a guy who's capable of playing the position and getting better and actually developing into a guy who's just as good as Braxton and can push him next year. So I love that pick as well.
Yeah, there's no question. And one key thing was this team had to get a backup left tackle. There wasn't one on the roster. You
You
could say
think Larry
Borum,
Borum
but
gets cut? Yeah,
Borum is a
Borum's
right
getting paid.
tackle.
Yeah.
You know, when he plays on the left side, it's he'll get you out of a few plays, but there's plays he can get your quarterback killed too. And personally, I don't think he's going to be around because of the money he's making. He's making over $3 million because of the extended play time he got his first 2 years. But is this team going to keep him at 3.2 when he's a backup? I just don't see it.
Not when you drafted Karan and we brought in Matt Pryor. There's just too many options there. Unless someone gets injured, we'll knock on wood. Most likely, yeah, I would agree.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, most likely I would agree. Larry Borum is probably gone before the season starts. Go ahead.
One guy I like, I just want to mention is Jatiri Carter.
Mm-hmm. I was a fan too. When he's played, he's looked good.
For some reason, though, he was in the doghouse, it seemed like, at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're never going to know why. But he was a guy that was playing early, and he played good.
He looked good.
And now he wasn't dressed in the last few games. So something went on. What? Who knows?
I never
that's
got
a talented
that
kid.
I never understood that one, because he's a guy when he was inserted into the lineup, he held his own and played well. When other guys in the lineup like Lucas Patrick and Cody Whitehair didn't do that as often. Even Nate Davis struggled a ton, and Larry Borum as well. And Jatiri Carter was a guy who came in and held his own and didn't look like he was a 6th-round pick. He looked good. He wasn't perfect, but he did look good. So that one question.
He was a tackle in college. But you know about his high school background?
He played basketball. Yeah, I've seen highlights of him dunking.
Point guard.
Yeah. Big.
Now here's the best part. He was a point guard that got D1 offers.
Oh man!
At like 260,
him playing PG.
At 260, got offers from lower level D1.
I like him. I mean,
yeah.
I won't write him off. But
I
haven't talked about him as much, and have kind of not written him off, but kind of moved him in the background until he shows me something again. I haven't really hyped him up because I saw what you saw last year. For some reason, it appeared he was in the doghouse. Maybe that was a Luke Getsy thing. We do have a new offensive staff coming in now, so hopefully that changes up. But I do like what Carter brought to the field when he was out there. He played tough.
No, he did, but and you don't know. Was it Getsy? Was it Simo?
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't C. If it was Simo, yeah, he's done.
He'll get a chance to reprove himself.
And that'll take us to our next pick, the one that surprised most people. What did you think about the punter pick? I know I know the value. Obviously, I'm never gonna, as a draft guy, I'm never gonna sit here and argue that people should take a punter in the fourth round. But I thought this was a unique draft. We didn't have a lot of picks. We didn't have a ton of needs. I definitely think we have needs, but not needs that you can necessarily fill the hole when you're in the fourth round and guarantee to fill that hole. Whereas bringing in a punter in today's NFL, where I've researched it a lot over the last week, and one of the things I read, it was an interesting article, was before 2015, the NFL net punting average across the entire league had never been over 40 yards. Since 2015, it's been over 40 yards every year, and it rose to 41 yards in 2017, and then this year it rose to 42 yards. So punting is more important than ever. What do you think about this pick?
Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
I didn't like the pick when they first did it. But then I started thinking, first of all, they kept putting the camera on the room and they're still sitting in there. And I said, you know what? He said he wouldn't, the day before, Paul said he wasn't adverse to trading back in if the right situation's there. What's it going to cost? And generally speaking, when you're out of picks and you want to get in and get a pick, you got to pay a round higher. Mm-hmm. So that's par for the course to pay a 4 to get a 5 now, because in that situation, they got to wait a year for the pick when they had that pick in their pocket. So you pay a little bit of a premium. Going back to when I started doing this in 1981, and all the drafts I've been involved in New York, it was 17. None happened in Chicago. We took one punter in all those years, and that was in the third round, and it was with an extra pick. That was Brad Maynard, who ended up kicking here. And our belief was, and how I was brought up, was if you want to take a kicker, you got to have multiple picks in a round.
Okay. And
take them with the lower one. And, you don't take them before the third, but use a round where you got multiple picks so you're not wasting a pick, so to speak. Okay, well, in this case, the Bears, had a huge need at edge, and they go out and they take a punter. Now, you can go back to 2 years ago, and I can't think of the guy's name, but there was a San Diego State punter who had a booming leg too. And Buffalo takes him in the 6th. In training camp, that's all they talked about. This guy was kicking a freaking mile. Because I'm from Buffalo, so I follow what the Bills do. And then he kicked really good in the preseason. And then all the BS from early in his career at San Diego State came up. The Bills had to cut him. He is back in the league. The Chiefs.
I think with the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, the Chiefs signed him. Dave Tobe Smart.
Good old Dave Tobe.
This guy's, probably the best guy since then. He probably has very similar leg. He's old. He's 27, but so what? He's a kicker.
Yep, exactly.
I think he can
more mature.
I think he can actually. What's the word I want? Area kick better.
Directional kicking, yeah.
Yeah, than the guy from San Diego State.
Oh yeah.
And his hang time is outrageously long. So he is a weapon, and there's no question about it. And now here's the best part, though. So, yeah, they take the pick, and you knew they needed an edge, and there were some good edges on the board. Every single one of those edges were still there the next round when they made the trade. Mm-hmm. One was taken. That was the Clemson kid, Xavier Thomas, and he wasn't in the equation for the Bears.
Yep.
Everybody else was there. That would have been if they would have taken the pick at 4, and chances are they might not have got the punter then.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know. That's a specialist. You don't know when they're going to go.
And that's what everybody said. That was the biggest criticism. We should have taken the pass rusher and waited on a punter.
Yeah, well, as it turned out, like I said, because I went through the draft to look, when was the next edge player taken, and it was a lot longer. It was like they all went in the 5th round. Nobody went from where Taylor was taken till the end of the 4th round and then the beginning of the 5th. And then the other 2 guys I liked Jackson from Brennan Jackson from Washington State, and I like Mo Camara from Colorado State. And in all honesty, I like Jackson better because he was more ready to play. He's a more complete player than Booker, but Booker's got more upside. Booker's going to be the better player 2 years from now.
I like that.
All three of those guys went within the next 10, 12 picks.
Mm-hmm. It's like, and that's, he's said that a lot, that they predict the draft really well. And you see something like that where Xavier Thomas went off the board and then they traded up. And then right after they trade up and take Austin Booker, all those guys went that you said. Yeah. Yep. Brennan Jackson, Mohamed Kamara. I believe there was a couple more as well. Javon Solomon, the guy out of Troy too. So it was right there, went off the board not long after we got Austin Booker. And I love it. And that'll actually, I know we're running low on time, so let me go ahead. I had a couple people ask questions and turn in questions, and we'll fly through those real quick. I'll just ask a couple of questions. Where was the Austin Booker one? Here it is. Okay, so Jacob Blair asked, does Austin Booker set the edge well enough to win the starting job before week 1? I would say probably not, but he's an impact pass rusher, is a situational guy is what I would say.
He needs to get bigger. I'll tell you what's interesting. I said this morning on my show. He was 240 at the combine. 3-4 weeks later at the Kansas Pro Day is 252. But he played, I know for a fact, he played at around 45 during the year.
Okay.
So, but I think his max, he's got a narrow frame. His max is going to be about 255, and you don't want 255 this year because that's not going to be good weight. You want him to put on lean mass weight. Will he be able to set the edge in another year? Yes. You know, what's interesting is that Dan Wiederer was on the Score this morning, and he brought up, I did not hear it, a guy sent it to me, the clip, is that Wiederer said the Bears have been in constant contact with Ngakoue throughout the offseason, monitoring his rehab with his ankle. He had surgery on the ankle after he broke it. And so, you know, there's interest on both sides, but they want to see where his ankle is. So is that interest for this week, next week, or July when they go to, you know, we don't know that, but there is mutual interest. And there's not much out there, and they do need one more vet. You got to get one.
I agree with that. And I think I think it's always made a lot of sense he was going to come back. He did produce a little bit. He was playing a lot better once we got Montez Sweat last year.
Well, then he wasn't doubled anymore.
Yeah, and I agree with Greg. I think Austin Booker, while his ability against the run did surprise me in college, it's more he sheds blocks. He's not a guy who can set the edge. He's a guy who can shed blocks and make plays in the backfield.
He's a DPR this year, in my opinion.
Yep, exactly. Okay, yep, exactly. Yep, a guy who can come in on that rush group. Relentless Mikey asks, with our limited draft capital this year, what is the most realistic scenario for the Bears to fix the center position?
They fixed it. They brought in 2 guys, and the fans just refuse to believe that they can play.
Yeah, I think
so. I mean, the only way they're going to believe is when the game starts. You know, being I'm from Buffalo, and I watch the Bills all the time. Bates is a good freaking player. Now they wanted him. The contract he's on right now is the contract they offered. What?
Do you think he's the starter? I think Coleman Shelton starts at center, and he's the.
They've already said that Bates is the starter.
You think so? Okay.
I mean, they come right out and said it. But it's.
I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, that was a month ago at least, but there's still going to be competition. But Shelton, I mean, hell, he's been the starter most of the last 2 years for the Rams. Pretty much the same offense.
And played pretty well, yeah.
Guys on this staff already know him and know what he can do, know what he can't do. Bates can play 2 positions. Yeah, he wasn't the starter this past year. And then there's some, you know, they drafted a kid real high, and they had to get him on the field. And one of the problems Buffalo had was going into the beginning of the league year, they were $45 million over. They had to get rid of people. And
Bates had no guaranteed money left on his deal either. So
yeah, but he still had 2 years left on the deal. And so And that's the deal that the Bears offered him
that we
2
wrote
years ago. So it's 2 years and $8 million that's left on that. So really $4 million a year. He's less than Patrick was getting last year. I think Patrick was getting 4.5, and Shelton's getting 3 or 3.2 on a 1-year deal. So I mean, but both of those guys are good players. It's who's going to win the job, and whoever doesn't win the job is going to be a solid backup. Shelton, I got a good friend who works for the Rams. Shelton has played guard for them. I don't know if he's played it in games, but he's done it in practice. He knows the guard position. So, both of them are center guard types, and they needed some people they know who could play. People want him to go out and get that guy who plays for the Dolphins. Hell, he's not even going to be able to play until November.
They keep bringing up his name.
I know. He can't play until probably November, maybe the middle of October. And you don't know how good he's going to be. He's coming off an ACL.
And there's not going to be any updates because he can't pass a physical, and that's just the same with Unique Ngakoue. And until he can pass a physical, and that we pretty much already answered this question by Thomas. He asked, "What are the chances we grab a veteran DE, and who do we think it would be?" I think other than Unique Ngakoue, there's not a lot of options out there. I know Carl Lawson is a name off the top of my head, and
he's a real short arm guy, though. That's what he's like. 31 and a quarter or 31 and a half inch arms for a guy that, in Flus that loves arm lengths.
I think Ngakoue makes too much sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And the guy that I've said no to people, but it could be a last resort, is Ogba, who was cut by Miami.
Oklahoma State. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Now this guy was a good player at one time. So 2 years ago, he signs a big contract. All of a sudden, he stopped being a good player. So, the Dolphins cut bait. They said, hell with it. And he had gotten hurt, too. He missed some time.
Yep.
So, and they had to eat some money because of that. So how hungry is he? Because like I said, he was a good player until he got that big contract. So is that a guy you want to sign and you're going to trust? But now if you give him just a little bit of money, make him, you got to do it on your deal, not something he wants.
As a situational type pass rusher, I didn't. Emmanuel Ogbah, he was a former second-round pick for the Browns back in 2016. He's got 42.5 career sacks. He's done some good work in the NFL, but in the last 2.5 years, he had 5.5 last year, 1 the year before, dealt with injuries all year.
Yeah, he had injuries.
He will be 31 this year.
Yep.
So wouldn't be bad for a short-term deal, but like you said, I think Ngakoue makes too much sense. They're just waiting for his ankle to heal. And I've also heard rumors that Ngakoue doesn't really like doing the mini camps. He likes doing his own thing, and he'll be here probably by training camp. So we'll see if that's true, but I do expect him to be back as a Bear this year.
I do too, and only because of, now if they would have taken, and instead of Rome Odunze in the first round and taken, say, Dallas Thomas or somebody like that, then that'd be a different story.
Probably not, yeah. But since we didn't get an early edge, that's exactly how I feel. Quickly, JMJ asks, will Torrey Taylor come into the NFL as a top 10 punter? I think it's a chance, but
don't forget he's got a kick at Soldier Field.
That's another factor that I didn't even think about. That win there can kill.
Which brings up a question, because I'll tell you who said this. Pep Hamilton's coached here and has been on opposing staffs coming here, and he was here for 3 seasons in that stadium. He said, "Man, there ain't going to be a 4,000-yard passer at that place." He said, "When they build that dome," he said, "there's too many games." He said when he came here, he was working for San Francisco, and they got here, and it wasn't a bad day, like it was sunny out and stuff, but it was real windy. He said they had to throw their game plan right out the window because they knew they couldn't throw in certain directions because of the wind coming off the lake. He said the 2 hardest places to play in the league are Chicago and Cleveland. Those stadiums are right on the lake.
Yep, both of them.
And he said the way the wind can come off the lake and just change things. So, I mean, he said, hey, the guy's got to really be luck out with the weather to be able to put up big numbers in the passing game.
100%. And hey, that's something we got to take into account. Has that been a factor? And we'll never know. We'll find out soon if Caleb Williams can do it or if it waits till we have to go a dome. And then Bob Harris asks, are there any other positions we can consider filling in free agency? I don't really see much. Maybe a minor move somewhere, but not really.
You could see some moves. You're going to see some post June 1st cuts, all cap related. Could there be, a bargain out there? Maybe, but who knows? Gotcha. I would say maybe safety, but they signed a guy. The guy was at Green Bay, and he played a lot of Green Bay.
And they signed a guy right before that too. That wasn't talked about. Tavarius Moore, who started some games for the Ravens a few years back and has some potential as well. Who's been hurt. So I think our safety room is pretty stacked.
I would think, and there could be an interior defensive lineman, but there's 2 undrafted free agents. I wrote about it this morning in Windy City Gridiron that got a chance. Randolph
was one of them. Yep.
Yeah, and he'd be a 1 technique.
Okay.
And the other guy is
was it the defensive
Jamari Croma?
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's more of a practice squad because he's raw. He had his big year this year. He had 10 sacks. He never had more than 1.5 before that.
Well, he wasn't. So he transferred. I'm trying to remember. I had it in my write-up. But so his first 2 years, he was at a different school, and he transferred last year to I think it was James Madison. Is that where he was at? And he had all that production, and then he just immediately left. So if he would have went back and had another year of production, I think he's a guy who probably would have been drafted. But like you said, those were probably my 2 favorite UDFAs.
Well, he got, when you watch tape, he got sack production playing inside.
Okay.
Got him inside and outside. But he's not big enough to play inside. He was 274 pounds on his pro day, 34.5-inch arms. Runs pretty good. He runs a 4.72. I think he's a pure edge, but at James maybe all FCS schools, and now they moved up a level, but it's not really it's probably one of the weakest, if not the weakest D1 conference. So he wasn't playing against great competition, but there's no question there's talent, and he's a hustler. He plays hard, and he's got the physical traits, but like Amagadeji, he's raw.
Very raw, 100%. Wesley Downs asked, what, if any, comp picks will we receive next year? That's something that we wouldn't really know unless Ian Cunningham leaves. We'd get that.
Well, now anybody you sign now, you're past the date for comp picks for this, that'll fill in next year. I don't think they get anything because, you lost Mooney, but it's not on one player. It's your total gains versus total losses.
I know Justin Jones got paid too, but I still don't think we did enough compared to what we spent. The only ones that counted that we spent were DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett, I believe, because Kevin Byard was cut, so he didn't count towards the comp.
Right. You might get a 7.
Okay.
But
our only hope is if Ian Cunningham leaves and we get that 3rd next year, get one of them.
Well, you actually get 2 3s, but I think
one next year and then one the year before. Yeah. After. Okay, we've got 2 left. Do we worry that Rome Odunze won't get separation in the NFL? I would say it was probably the only thing on his tape that, if I had to nitpick as little as I could about Rome Odunze, I did feel like there were times where he almost looked for the contested catch compared to trying to get away, but I'm not worried about it. I think he's a super.
No, I thought he got better separation than Harrison did, to tell you the truth.
I love that. And then last question here. My guy Eric Harper asks, what weight do you put into the combine results / relative athletic scores in comparison to college film on the athlete? Great question.
There's certain things on the combine that I look for at certain positions. I'm not a big RAS guy because that's pure athleticism. We can go back. I mean, my day, Carl Lewis was the best 100-meter guy in the world. But he couldn't play football. And, Ronaldo Nehemiah, remember that name, was the best hurdler in the world. The 49ers signed him to a contract, but he couldn't catch a cold in winter. So those
our
guys
two
would
most
be off.
athletic guys. Our three most athletic a year ago were Justin Fields, Chase Claypool, and Velus Jones. So I do like athletes, but sometimes it's not
They got to
just
be
about
players.
the athleticism. Yeah, they got to be
They got to
football
be players. I mean, do you want to? Where the number makes sense to me is on the big guys,
Mm-hmm.
because then because like in this offense, if you look at what they've drafted now, it's third year in a row. Offensive lineman, every guy they take is an athletic offensive lineman
with long arms.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Tyree Carter was a tackle, runs a sub-5 flat, and was a point guard in high school. I mean,
and kicked butt at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. And Braxton Jones is another guy, another sub-5 flat guy with long arms, very athletic. Can you play in an outside zone scheme? Can you play in space and adjust on the move? And so, if you're going to you're not going to see a guy who runs a 5'2" and can't play in space and can't adjust. That's the one thing about Braxton Jones that really impresses me. When you see him out in space, he looks like a linebacker.
Awesome. That's part of I think that was one of the reasons why Luke Getsy called so many screen passes. And I'm not trying to defend Luke Getsy, but some of those guys are offensive line, especially because Darnell Wright can do it too. But when you have Darnell Wright, Tevin Jenkins, and Braxton Jones running downfield, just destroying linebackers and defensive backs, the big play potential is there. We didn't get enough execution, especially blocking from our wide receivers, that was lacking this year.
Yep, no question.
But hey, I love it. Greg, do you have any other final thoughts on this year's draft class or what you think the Bears are getting?
I like. There's one guy we didn't bring up, the running back from Howard, Ian Wheeler.
Okay, yeah, the kick returner guy. Yeah,
gonna make the team.
You think so? Okay, you think can he return punts too?
No, just as a kick returner.
Okay.
But he's 5'9" and change, 205 jump out of the building type guy, and excellent change of direction, real explosive. 3 return touchdowns in 3 years, averaged 29 yards kickoff return.
And we got new kick return rules debuting this year. And
I know that rule because we used it in the XFL when I was there.
You're the special guy on that.
If you got a good special teams coach who can figure out a way to block that thing, that's a big play waiting to happen.
I love to hear that. And hey, nothing more the Bears fans would like than to get a couple return touchdowns this year to boost the special teams.
You only got one. You got one line to beat. That's it. You get that crease, it's all over.
It could make the NFL more exciting to watch, bringing the return. I mean, I remember how exciting Devin Hester was watching. I think all Bears fans do, and we haven't really seen anything like that in the NFL since Devin Hester. And there never will be another Devin Hester, but just seeing exciting returns become a part of the game again is something I think all fans would love and is good for football.
Well, this guy, I'll tell you what, I didn't know much about him until about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And he played in a rotation at Howard, and he was actually the number 3 back, but he averaged over 7 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big play waiting to happen. Catches the ball really well. And like I said, his return work is very, very good. So in this new scheme, I think that, he could be a home run hitter in that. Now he's got to be able to show if he's going to make the roster. And he's a running back. He's still got to be able to pass protect. So you got to show that. If he can't do that, then he's on the practice squad.
100%.
But
especially with a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Greg, it was an absolute honor to have you on here, man. Guy I consider a legend in Bears scouting and a friend. Greg, you're welcome to come back on the show anytime. And I'm always here if you want to talk football, man. It was a pleasure chopping it up with you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, my friend.
I appreciate you, Greg. Let me get a bear down from you.
Bear down.
That's what I love to hear, man.